have my lone library hat tip to Hindu scripture. It's my copy of the Bhagavad Gita. That I think was given to me by some guy with a flower at an airport. I'm not entirely sure. And I've got several books on Buddhism. This is probably my favorite overview of Buddhist scripture. Or not Buddhist scripture, sorry, Buddhist philosophy. It's by Thich Nhat Hanh. It's called The Heart of the Buddhist Teachings. And it's just an overview of the lists. Buddhists love lists. Four Noble Truth, the Eightfold Path, the 27 marks of whatever it is, right? And this goes through all of them. So this is just a good overview of Buddhist belief. Here's some a great kind of photo book of Hindu sculpture from some of these temples. The sort of thing I pulled my slides from. And here's the same sort of thing for Buddhism in photo book. I can give you some good ideas. This is probably my. I think it has problems, but it's the best I've found so far. It's called Mindfulness in Plain English by John. How do you say his name? Bhante. How do you say his name?
Bhante Kumaratana.
Okay, I'll let you say it. Who is the teacher of John? Right? So you're his grandson in the Dharma or something like that. And I'm really looking for a good introduction to how to meditate. If you want to learn to meditate, a good introduction. This is probably the best I've found so far. I'm still looking, though. Really nice. I feel like we can do better, but no one has. So that I've found yet. This is one of those things that tempts me to write my own book at some point. But I give these away to people if they promise to actually read it and use it. I'll give it to you. So this is our meditation book. This is Buddhism Without Beliefs, which is an atheist who was Stephen Batchelor, who was speaking last week, is it?
No, he'll be speaking in Santa Fe on the 31st.
So on the 31st of this month in Santa Fe, he's going to be visiting and giving a talk. And what this is just, if you're interested in the philosophy of Buddhism and the way it can be applied without some sort of religious or belief in supernatural sorts of things, he's one of kind of the pioneers in the Western version of atheist Buddhism, and how to use that.
He's getting ruffled feathers.
I'm sure he ruffles all sorts of people's feathers. Although I think we'll talk about this a little bit, but I think my impression is that the Buddha was interested in removing people's suffering, and some of his theological constructs were something he himself said in some of his sutras, if we assume they're historical, auxiliary, and you're free to take them or leave them. And clearly he believed them in some of his supernatural elements, but I'm not sure that he would have disapproved of someone jettisoning them. I think he kind of would have said, well, if that's all you're ready for, right, we'll remove as much suffering as you're ready for. That was kind of his deal. And so if you're not ready to accept it all, then that's fine. Just take whatever parts you like. And so I think he wouldn't have had much of a problem. But, that's my impression. It's hard to say. This is The Happiness Hypothesis by Jonathan Haidt, who is a positive psychologist doing kind of modern neuroscience research. This is the guy that got me interested in Buddhism, and I've given already a sermon at the UU Church on his stuff. But he's the one that got me interested actually in Buddhism. And this is almost a scientific approach to the same questions the Buddha was struggling with, which is how to remove suffering and live a happy life. And he says, essentially, the Buddha got some of it right and some of it wrong, and here's what kind of modern neuroscience says about what works to make people happy. So he's kind of it's almost an atheist form of Buddhism, but it's more of a neuroscientist. Here's the parts of Buddhism I dig. So these are my kind of Buddhism books. Feel free to come look at them after. Let's do Buddhist temples. So what is Buddhism? Buddhism begins when the Buddha notices someone in suffering. His father tried to keep that from him, living in the palace. He sees someone suffering. You guys have to help me.
Old age, sickness, and death.
Old age, sickness, and death. He sees someone who's old, someone who's sick, someone who's dying or died, and he says, "This is horrible. Suffering is awful." And he goes off into the wilderness, and he goes to a bunch of yogis, and he meditates with them. and he becomes an ascetic, and he tries that, and he tries everything he can think of, and nothing just really works. And the harder he tries to concentrate, the worse things get. And at some point, he wanders off under a Bodhi tree, and he sits in the lotus position, again, the symbolism of the lotus, which is this pretzel thing you tie your feet into. And he meditates, and he says, I'm not going to leave this spot, so goes the myth, until I achieve enlightenment and find the ultimate solution to life's problems. He does so, and at some point he claims to achieve enlightenment. He goes back to his teachers and says, you were wrong about these points, specifically mindfulness and awareness, and your meditation technique was, I suppose, too concentraty, and you needed mindfulness, and I've achieved enlightenment, and here's the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path. Therefore, people began to follow him, and he established this new religion, this offshoot of the Indian tradition that was there before, which maybe was Hinduism, maybe was some part of the remember I said Hinduism was originally fragmented, part of that. From the milieu that eventually would become Hinduism. I said before from Hinduism, probably more accurate, as David pointed out to me during the break. It's the milieu that became Hinduism that he kind of sprouted from. And these are the cores of, and the Buddhism loves lists. So you get Four Noble Truths, Eightfold Path, the 3 marks of existence, and the 27 something or others, and you get lots of these lists. But the Four Noble Truths are the essence, and that is that life is suffering. The reality of suffering doesn't just mean that we suffer right now. It means that everything in life is kind of unsatisfactory. You really can't achieve, there's no way in this life to find kind of in these things around us happiness. So instead we relinquish them. So the cause of suffering is that we cling to these things. The suffering is real because we cling to the things around us, and those things really can't bring us ultimate happiness, and we need to relinquish them. And if we stop clinging, then we can get out of suffering. So suffering is real. It comes because we cling to stuff. But if we stop clinging to stuff, we can get out of suffering. And there's a path to help you do that. And that path is the Noble Eightfold Path. And then there's the same belief in karma and the cycle of rebirth that we see in the Hinduism. And there's this belief that once we follow the Eightfold Path and relinquish, then we can escape the cycle of rebirth, which is what we saw in the Hinduism. And here's our Eightfold Path. There's parts of it that have to do with wisdom, if you acquire wisdom. There's parts that if you act the right way, and there's parts that say if you meditate the right way, then you can escape suffering. So wisdom is the right view, right intention, and then the action is the right speech, right action, and right livelihood, and then the meditation is right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. So again, there's the concentration is the same thing we saw in the Hindu approach, but it adds this extra emphasis on mindfulness. And mindfulness is something that's really hard to describe because everyone feels like they're awake. How many of you feel like you're asleep? Maybe I put you to sleep. But for the most part, we feel like we go through our lives awake. Mindfulness says that you don't. You're actually asleep most of your life. And when you recognize what it's like to wake up, that's when you realize how asleep you've been. And this comes with a catch-22. You don't realize you're asleep until you catch a glimpse of what it's like to wake up from the dream. So maybe the best way to teach people what it's like to be awake is to maybe give an example of what it's like when you're clearly asleep. So how many of you have driven to the grocery store and ended up at your neighbor's house or your aunt's house or church, right? So you were going to church and you ended up at the grocery store. You're going to the grocery store and you ended up at church, and then you're like, why am I here? Right? So everyone's done that, right? To one degree or another, we do that all our lives, though. That's just an extreme example of what's happening all the time around us. We call it being lost in thought because we are lost. Or we're asleep. We're not aware. So, here's the simple, and this sounds just so simple, and I'm going to let John try to show you just how hard it is. If no one objects, last time we did this, we did a practice Buddhist meditation for 5 minutes, just to give you an idea of what we're talking about. So if no one objects, we'll do it again here. If you don't want to do it, don't do it. But we'll sit for 5 minutes and try to see what it's like, and John will guide it. and you're welcome to come on up and do this. But it sounds simple. You're going to pick something to concentrate on. I'll let John talk you through that. You're going to concentrate on it. So you feel like you're in charge of your own life, don't you? You feel like you have free will. You feel like you can decide what to do, right? So John's going to ask you to choose to do something, and you're going to try to do it for 5 minutes. And hopefully what you're going to realize is that it's not so simple. It sounds simple, it sounds easy, and it's really hard. You can spend the rest of your life trying to do it and figure it out. So.
Oh, don't let him scare you. It's a piece of cake. So, James did a nice job of giving a thumbnail of Buddhism in regard to meditation. You saw meditation was one of the sort of, if you compress the Eightfold Path, you basically get three things. You get teachings about concentration or awareness. You get teachings about virtue, living a life that's aligned with the Dharma in a way that reduces conflict and suffering that's caused by just sort of unnecessarily sort of going against the grain, and wisdom. And so meditation is part of the concentration pillar of these three. And the idea, the way it's become integrated into Buddhist path is that part of the reason we suffer is because we're not here. It's like James was describing, we're somewhere else. It's because we often just don't like to be where we are. We want things to be different than they are. And so we tend to get sort of caught up in our minds in thoughts about regrets of the past or wishes for the future. And in the meantime, life is just sort of passing you by, or you passing it by. And so meditation is sort of a skill building practice that little by little allows you to have a stable mind that can be present and be aware. And so I'm just going to do 5 minutes of meditation with the emphasis on just being present. So I need to be aware of when 5 minutes is up. So let's start. We'll just take a comfortable position. A lot of Buddhists, especially Buddhists at my age, meditate in a chair. They don't meditate on the floor because they kill their knees and their backs. But when they were young, they probably did a lot of that. But the idea of the posture is just to adopt a position where you're comfortable, stable, and alert. And so one of the first things we'll do is we'll sit so that you aren't sort of laid back in the chair, but erect. Your legs are in a comfortable position. Your feet are on the floor. Feel your spine. Feel how when you're balanced, the vertebrae of your spine are stacked on each other like blocks, and the head is resting comfortably on the neck. The head's tilted down just a little bit. And in that position, you can now relax your shoulders. You can even sort of let your arms just sort of drop for a minute. Loosen your shoulders. Rest your hands at the wrists, on your thighs, or in your lap. And this is the basic posture, sitting. It's stable. It's both it's possible to be both alert and relaxed at the same time. And James talked about having a focus for concentration. All concentration practices have a focus. The idea is to train your mind to be able to stay on something, to be able to focus on something. That continual practice builds mental stability. And so traditional Buddhist practice is to use the breath as the object of concentration. The nice thing about the breath is that it's always there unless you have some problem that's now irrelevant. And it's also something that's really interesting because we tend to get caught up in ourselves and think we're in control. But the breath is a wonderful metaphor for the fact that we're neither in control nor not in control, because the breath is involuntary, but not quite completely involuntary. We can actually manipulate our breath if we choose to do it. So we're going to use the breath as the object of concentration. And I'll lead you through what's called a guided meditation, where the teacher just makes some suggestions during the meditation practice. So let's start. We're going to start by bringing our attention into our bodies, because although our minds want to go into the future to find a better life than where we are now, or into the past to think about how we got where we were, the goal is to be present, and the body is always present. So we'll start by just trying to be open and aware to sensations of the body. And so we'll start by just relaxing. Now that we're in a stable position, stable posture, we can relax a little bit and feel the weight of our bodies in the chair. We can feel the sensations of our feet on the floor. We can even sort of scan our body and just make note of the various sensations that occur. Feelings of weight, pressure, sensations moving around the body, or our awareness of them, moving from one part of the body to the other. And then, to sort of settle the mind a little bit more, we'll take 3 deep cleansing breaths, and we'll push on each breath, we'll push all of the air out that we feel comfortable exhaling from our lungs, and then just let our breaths just sort of come back in. So we'll take 3 breaths. And now we'll bring our attention to the sensation of the breath. Different traditions look for the breath in different places. In the Far East, in Japan and China, we look for the breath in the expansion of the belly when we breathe. In particular, the place just below the navel. So every time we breathe, we can feel the breath expand into our bellies, and then the belly relaxes and the breath comes, exhales, goes out. In India and Southeast Asia, they look for the sensation of the breath near the nostrils. So somewhere at the bridge of the nose, or the tip of the nose, just back from the nose, in the nasal passages. The key is to just find the place where it's easiest to notice the breath. It's called the touch sensation of the breath. So if you want to take one quick breath, you can easily discover where in that area you find the breath the easiest. And now with those preparations, being a little relaxed, you can follow the breath. You can follow each inhalation or each exhalation. Looking for that sensation. So now, if you're a human being, as you've been trying to follow the breath, your mind wanders off, starts to follow some train of thought, what you have to do when you get home, how you messed up today, your plans for the future. And when that happens, it's not a problem. We simply notice it and let our minds find their way back to the touch sensation of the breath. And we simply repeat that exercise over and over again. The point where your mind has wandered off and you actually notice that it's wandered off is a pure sensation of awareness. Your ability, whatever it is, at this time, to focus very strongly on that one area where you feel the breath the strongest, and to keep your mind there, is the feeling of concentration. So now we'll just continue, each of us, until the end. Following the breath, discovering we're lost, gently returning back. And now as we near the end, it's often traditional in my lineage to practice contemplation of loving kindness. These are phrases that are simply repeated to oneself that open the heart. And we always start with compassion for ourselves, with loving kindness for ourselves. So we say, may I be happy. May I be well. May no harm come to me. May no difficulty or adversity come to me. And may I find peace. With that, we open our eyes.
I'm glad you're here. So I don't know if you're like me, but the instructions for that seem to me to be remarkably simple. Feel the breath, concentrate on the breath, notice what it's like to feel that sensation for 5 minutes. You make a decision that you're going to do that, and you feel like you're in charge of your own mind. You sit down to do what you've decided to do, and 3 breaths in, my brain is off planning my next day, and I realize that I am just absolutely, completely, and in all other ways insane. But it is okay, because I'm no more insane than I was before. It's just now that I know it. And I'm no more insane than anyone else, because everyone else that does this comes usually to the same conclusion, that they're just absolutely crazy. You're not in charge, you can't do what you want to do with your mind, and you can either be frustrated by that or not. And so the instruction is very gently bring your mind back. Don't berate yourself, don't judge yourself, just notice. And that moment of, aha, I wasn't doing what I intended to do, is what we call mindfulness. So if you achieve mindfulness, that's what you're looking for. What you felt that moment when you noticed, wow, I'm thinking about my taxes. And when you realize that, that's why you're awake that moment you woke up. And that moment before you were asleep. And there's something else you notice here. When you're awake, your intention, which was to follow your breath, is easier to achieve. It's when you're asleep that you don't follow your intentions as well. You're off doing something that you didn't intend. And when you're aware of what you're doing, without any real effort usually, your mind just kind of goes back to your intentions. So that moment of awareness actually, and this is where the psychology comes into play that has nothing to do, with Buddhism or ancient religion, that it says that if you practice this in clinical trial after clinical trial after clinical trial, people who do this end up having more self-control. They end up achieving their life's ambitions to a higher degree, and they're even using it as a cure for PTSD, because there is no anxiety in that moment where you feel your weight in the chair. Where is the anxiety? The anxiety is coming from the past or from your worries about the future, and if you bring yourself back to that moment, your anxieties melt away, and you find a certain level of peace that you otherwise don't have. So this has become something of a non-religious fad, in the sense that if you suffer from PTSD and you go to a psychologist today, there's a pretty good chance this is what they'll teach you to do. Because we know kind of from objective measurements that what Buddhists have been doing for generations actually works. So what does this have to do with the temples and the rituals of Buddhism? When Buddhism tends to develop ritual, now there's a lot of variation and variety in Buddhism, just as there is in Hinduism. So I'm going to try to finish this up in the next 15 minutes. When they develop a sacred space, its purpose is primarily to facilitate mindfulness among the people in the space. When they create a ritual, it's usually to develop mindfulness in the people performing the ritual. So almost all of their goal then is directed towards this idea of mindfulness in terms of their space and in terms of the rituals they produce. So this is my favorite Buddhist ritual. It's from Tibetan Buddhism. The Dalai Lama, it used to be a secret ritual that they wouldn't let anyone film or record in any way. And the Dalai Lama said this is important enough to teach people about, that he allowed some people to come in and photograph one of these. And he's begun to go around from place to place performing this ritual for various audiences. So something that used to be kind of sacred and reserved for the monks, he's opened up to the laity in a kind of a profound way. So this is the way the ritual goes. First thing they do is they lay down the sacred center with two cross lines using this chalk that they flick. It's a chalk line. So they've marked the center. Here we will build the temple of our God. They lay out the center, and then they lay out several various squares around that center. Then they take a pole and they put it in the center, and they take a string, and they take a writing utensil, and they inscribe, in a compass sort of way, circles. So they're drawing out squares and circles with various techniques. This is the Dalai Lama. After the squares and circles are kind of laid out, he takes, better read this, he takes colored sand in the mind realm, so there's different parts of it, or mind, body, different parts of the mandala represent different things. And he rubs the metal funnel with a scraper. The vibrations cause the sand to move out in a controlled manner. He holds the feminine Ganta bell in his left hand and a masculine Vajra thunderbolt in his right hand. And he scrapes this thing, and little colored bits of sand fall down this tube, and he lays them out along the patterns he's inscribed. And this is what they're drawing by laying out these different colors. You see the different colors of sand. You see the monks wearing masks so they don't breathe, because if you breathe on it, you ruin it. It's made out of sand. If you breathe on it, you ruin it. And it's meditative. So the process of laying out the sand is a mindfulness process. They have to be aware of what they're doing at every moment. They don't mess up. They have to be aware of what kind of sand they're laying down and what the sand represents. And they very carefully place the sand until they create that thing. And wow is what comes to mind. You see that and you're just like, wow, this is one of the most beautiful pieces of art that's ever been created out of sand on a red mat with a bunch of meditating monks. And they're not just using it as a meditative tool after it's created. The creation of it is itself the meditation. And so what do you think they do after they finish? That's right. So you create this beautiful thing, and then the very next moment, and you see that, and it just makes me want to cry. I want to preserve this thing in a museum for all eternity. But that's the antithesis of one of the concepts of Buddhism, which is we suffer because we cling to things and want them to be impermanent when they're not.
We want them to be permanent when they're not.
We want them to be permanent when they are in fact impermanent. So, in fact, this is not hard to see. My mother died, and it hurts because I want her to be permanent, and she's not, and I'm not. And I can either make myself miserable over the fact that she wasn't permanent, or I can enjoy the moments I had with her and enjoy the memories I have of her. And in those moments, she brought joy in my life. And so building this mandala brings joy, and we can either sit and cry because it's now being swept up, or we can enjoy the process of building it, we can enjoy the process of having it, and then we can respect and appreciate it as it's gone. So it's a very, very direct representation of the principle of impermanence and how we are supposed to not cling to these even beautiful things in our life, even the beautiful things in our life can be a cause of suffering if we cling to them. So they sweep it up, and then after they sweep it up, they put it in a bag, the sand in a bag, and they actually throw it in a river. It's washed downstream. This is a very moving ritual, the meaning to it. And of course, this is this moment of syncretism that I can't pass up. This is a Mormon quilt. Mormons love to crochet quilts and tabletop things. Here's a Mormon crocheted, what do they call it? Things you put on the table? Tablecloth. Mormon crocheted tablecloth. Very intricately crocheted, and it's, of course, a mandala.
Do you mean crocheted or embroidered?
I think it's crocheted.
Oh.
I think it's actually, my mom made one of it, not a mandala, but they actually crochet little lines and tie them together and make little loops, and it's very intricate. And she spent years making this thing, and I've got this tablecloth she made this way. And so, but they've made it out of, there's a Mormon temple here, and there's their T gates, and so you'll notice how religions tend to borrow and syncretize. And there's nothing in Mormonism that requires a mandala, but this person thought it was pretty. I think it's a little bit eclectic to me. But this is what. Remember when I said the mandala and the temple are related? You see this with the colors? You see this? This is this. Or other way around, this is a two-dimensional depiction of this three-dimensional space. It's a temple. The waters around it and the different sections, the four sections represent, there's a mind realm, and I don't know the different realms. There's probably the body, the mind, the feelings. The objects of the mind would be my guess, but I'm not entirely sure. Each represented by a different color. And then these T's represent these gates to the temple. And the whole thing is a big picture of a temple. And you can use it as a focus of meditation if you want. So this is a monk named Bodhisattva. He was protected by the Buddha, something like that. Carries an incense burner to a stupa and a pavement leading to the gate with streamers flying from the staff at the top. This petroglyph is one of 20,000 others carved in the mountains of Pakistan along an ancient Silk Road. So this is a fairly early picture of a Buddhist temple, and this is the idea. There's a road, there's a gate, there's a mound that is both phallic and represents the mound of creation. There's a pole representing the cosmic center around which everything turns, usually with streamers around it, and there's the worshipper, in this case, offering incense. And so this is the Buddhist temples we start seeing. They're in the same design. This is the stupa design. This is an 82 meter high. It's perhaps the largest stupa erected in such a massive base. The Sinhalese national epic, the Mahavasana, describes the great detail of the laying out of the ground plan, where a silver staff was placed at the center and a cord was run out from it and then inscribed. This big compass thing. So he's laying out the circle. This is exactly the way they do it for the mandala. Right? You plant the pole. Here we'll build the temple of our God. You plant the cane, you draw the string, you inscribe the circle of the heavens, and then you build everything around that sacred pole and the circle you've built around it. In his zeal, King Dutan somebody wanted to build the largest stupa ever and had to be restrained by his monks from making it impossibly big. And it is a massive sort of construction.
Where is that?
This is Rumhaweli Dagaba, current state after numerous restorations. The four smaller stupa in the corners make this plan Apachamasanta, or 5 sacred centers. This is the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Sometimes called a quincunx. Center with the 4 things. Let's see if it's going to tell me where it is. One of the most common ground plans in Asia. But there, we use the Latin term quincunx to describe the same thing. I don't know.
Stupas in Asia. It's in Sinhalese, then it's Sri Lanka.
It's Sri Lanka.
Sri Lanka? Okay. This one is the Great Stupa at Sanchi. And this one is going to tell you what that T shape is. You see this? This is the T shape. This is the gate. So you'll notice that this has the circle, the square, and then it's got these T's at the 4 edges. So that tells this is a really good depiction of what that T is supposed to represent in the pictures of the mandala. If you zoom in on the, well, I don't know if you zoom in on the T, what you find is that it's actually a scroll. So this is a scroll where the perspective is flopped impossibly. The scroll is rolled up on the side and then it flops sideways so you can read it, and then it's rolled over there. And then over here is the various scenes from the Buddha's life, creating this T entrance gate. Once you get inside, there's a courtyard for circumambulation, as well as little stairs to go up to the top where you can make a smaller circuit. And here is the floor plan. So you can come in, circumambulate, go to the top, circumambulate, and you'll also notice this twist with the gate. Right? The gate goes out and twists. So I think I have a top-down floor plan. Here it is. So it comes like this. This is the pole around which the universe turns. So this is a swastika. So you'll notice that the Nazis borrowed this symbol and have turned it into something they kind of abhor today. But it's a much older symbol, and it represents the turning wheel of heaven. And it's actually present in the floor plans of some of these Buddhist and Hindu temples. And hopefully we can, I would wish we could cleanse that particular symbol of its negative connotation, because I'd love to be able to use it today. Yeah.
Can we go back one slide?
Sure.
So one of the things that I find interesting is that they have started with the map. That's the first thing that they have. And then through the course of thousands of years, they added several things. They added the course around the map itself, and then they added the course on the outside of that, and then they added the walls, and then they added the gate. And so as the time is going, it's evolving and becoming a more intricate thing and more explicit of what they're trying to get out of it.
Okay. So what we've had is a mandala used in meditation and creation. We had the Hindu mandala, which was used as an object of meditation. Then we had the mandala that was a meditative act in creating and destroying it. And then we had a building that was itself a mandala. And now we're going to have that was slowly built over time, right? I mean, some of the mandalic elements were added as it was slowly built and created. Now we have, this is a path to the Buddha. And the path itself was designed to be a meditative act. So now what we have is a monk doing what we call walking meditation, which is the same thing you did sitting, except now we try to feel our weight on our feet. We try to be very mindful and aware of what it feels like to walk, what our balance feels like, what our body feels like. We feel the soles of our feet. This is what this monk is doing as he slowly approaches the sacred point of the Buddha. When he's walking across this path. Come on. Here we go. That includes this turning wheel. This is the wheel of the heavens. It's got a lotus blossom here, and it's got these ducks. And I don't remember. There's a reason that the ducks are a symbol of it's something or other in Buddhism that I've forgotten. But here is the strangest one to me. There's 4 beasts that are repeated all the way around the outside, almost in a zodiac sort of thing. And this shows up in Egypt, where they're the 4 sons of Horus. And it shows up in Ezekiel, where there's these 4 beasts on the 4 sides of the chariot in his Ezekiel vision. And then it shows up again in the book of Revelation. And so this is one of those things that's in Judaism, it's in Christianity, it's in Egyptian religion. I've seen it in Mesopotamian religion. And now it shows up in these Buddhist forms. And it's these 4 animals that are associated with the turning wheel of the heavens, the 4 corners of the earth, the movement of time. They're almost always zodiacal in some way. And there it pops up again in Buddhism. And I don't know quite what to make of that, but it's one of those things that shows up everywhere you look, and I'm not quite. This is from the other direction, so if you look out over as the approacher, and now you look at it as the Buddha looking back the other way. This is called the moonstone, the point of view of the Buddha at the center, around which everything revolves. The 4 animals, elephant, of the sun solstice and equinoxes move endlessly in Padakshya to the right through the years. Buddhist symbolism, the lotus is symbolic of purity. I said that. Was it going to tell me about the duck? Nope. It's not. Right. So again, this is Sri Lanka. We already showed you this earlier. This is how I started, but this is the proliferation of Jainic and Buddhist temples in Burma. This is the most famous. It's the Ananda Temple, built by King Kainzita around 1084 AD. 4 huge standing Buddhas face the 4 cardinal directions within the center of a cross-shaped floor plan. The red-painted lower parts of the towers and the 4 sides are the process of being regilded, but they halted for lack of funds. This is gold. It's supposed to continue and go a long way down. We had some very, very, very beautiful buildings.
Where was that?
That was in Burma, I believe, wasn't it?
The city? Or just out in the country?
Temples of Pagan. I need to go to these places so I know what I'm talking about. I do apologize, like I said, when I do Egypt, and I'm in my own, when I'm enjoying expanding my own, but we are outside of some of my expertise. But again, here's the quincunx, 5 plan, and then these great statues in the path to the building. And then here's my favorite, and then we're going to be out of time. Borobudur. This is my favorite. The pyramids are famous. I don't know why this isn't more famous. It kind of puts the pyramids at Giza to shame. It's a similar size, but it's much more intricate, much more fancy. This is the place to go. If you want to go see one of the wonders of the ancient world, you should go here.
Where is it?
This is Borobudur is the name of the temple.
It's Borobudur?
Yeah.
In Indonesia.
Where in Indonesia?
I think it's on the main island of Indonesia, where the capital, Jakarta, is located. But or it might be on one of the islands to the east of there, like between Bali and the main island. But it's Indonesia.
So the email I sent around had a link to the Wikipedia article for this temple. This is one of my favorites. It has kind of all the elements of the temple put together. You'll notice it's made up of stupas, a central stupa followed by rings of stupas around it, followed by a pyramid.
Is that stone?
Yes.
The pyramid is...
Yeah, but it's stone brick. It's not.
Yeah, stones.
Yeah.
Can you
Made out
go
of stone.
inside?
Yes.
How
Well, no, not inside yeah, the pyramid itself is well, I'll show you the kind of floor plan. Go ahead.
How old is it?
This is about 1080, I think, somewhere.
This is 9th century,
So,
and it's in Magelang, Central Java.
Okay. So I was off by 100 years, but I was pretty close, 9th century. Inside, so there's a progression. Well, yeah, let's just show you this. So it's built on top of a mound. So the pyramid is kind of solid blocks all the way through. So in that sense, it may be more massive. But this has the same kind of area, but it's just built on stone on top of a mound. But the way this obviously works is you've got this approach, and then you can circumambulate, and then you've got an approach, and you can circumambulate, and an approach, and circumambulate, approach, circumambulate, and then you finally reach the sacred center. So the whole thing is a great pilgrimage through the process of enlightenment. You'll notice that it's got the square and the circle, but the outermost square isn't perfectly square, and these circles aren't perfectly circular, except this, when you get to the very center, it becomes a perfect circle. So you're just slowly moving from the square world, into the circular center. So it's a journey to the heavens. And when you start at the bottom, this is the Buddhist concept of faith. So Christian faith says you've got to believe in this person and he was the Son of God to be saved. We think of faith that way. But faith is a much broader concept. I say I have faith in my Father because I trust him. Well, if a Buddhist comes to you and says, if you do this weird thing with your breath, you'll be happier, trust me. You can either say no, and that's fine. And if you do, you walk on your own path and you don't have the advantages that you might have if you follow the path. Maybe it wouldn't help. Maybe it would. It depends on whether he's right or not. So the concept of faith is this idea that when you start the path, you can't see the end. So Borobudur is very carefully built such that if you stand at the base and look up, you can't see the central stupa. It's very carefully designed so you can't. And what this represents is when you start your path, you can't see your destination. So the only reason you have for walking this path is that somebody told you there's something of value at the top. And you have to decide whether or not to trust them enough to walk the path and find out for yourself. And the path is just hard enough that maybe it's not worth it. So you have to decide if you're going to try. And that's this idea of faith. And so Borobudur is designed to represent this concept of faith, this journey. Along the path, at the outside, you get the physical. This is the mundane aspect of Buddhism in the sense that it's these pictures from the Buddha's life, or from various reincarnations of his life, and all sorts of stories about it. These are the stories. These things point you in enlightenment, but they themselves are not enlightenment. So you start out in this kind of very physical world where you're seeing all this stuff. But originally, of course, it would have been painted. So this is actually some parchment found from the same time period. It gives you an idea of the colors that they would, and paints they would have used. So imagine those colors on these scenes as you walk your way around Borobudur. Seeing these stories that point you at enlightenment. When you get to the center and you're about to leave the square circumambulation for the central inner courtyard, there's a gate which is made like a mouth. And this is the mouth of time. And like all things, it eats you up. It spits you out. And so this is again one of those scenes that shows up in Native American architecture, but there's all these entrances to the temples, the sacred parts that are these mouths. So this mouth eats you, you go through it, and you come out the other side, and you now approach, hopefully, enlightenment. And what you have is, before the pictures of the Buddha were just there, you could see them. Right? That's the physical realm. We're sitting in front of you, but that's not enlightenment. You move in here, they've got Buddhas sitting inside of these stupas that are lattice worked. So you can only sort of see them. They're about half obscured. So you're moving into the cognitive realm where you no longer touch it, see it, it's the mental. And then in the very center, the stupa is completely covered over. Now originally there probably would have been a Buddha statue in the center as well, but it's been looted. It was probably made out of gold, etc. It's been looted, so now there's an empty chamber here. But there's no way to access that chamber. It's completely bricked over. So it's hidden. So the ultimate goal, that ultimate sacred center, is hidden from view. So you go from something that's purely visible to partially visible to completely hidden. And that's, again, another depiction of your journey towards enlightenment, which is this thing that you can't quite touch or see.
Okay.
So they took this one apart when they were cleaning it, I think. Here's what the Buddha inside looked like, the statue. Yeah.
There's something else about this thing where you can't see to the center, and also when you have to do this corner turning to get inside, right? I believe that in Bali, at least, which is the only part of Indonesia that preserves, it's Hindu, it's not Buddhist, but it preserves the Indian religious culture, kind of just purely. There's a belief that insane people and demons travel in straight lines, whereas sane people move in curves. Right? And so that's why you have, one reason why you have things like, you have to do these indirect things to get inside from things.
Well, because if you're locked in a straight line trying to hold on to one path, we're supposed to adapt to the moment. Anyway, so you'll notice that each Buddha is doing a different hand gesture. Each one has different meaning, and I don't know them, but they're very beautifully done. And I want you to get an idea of how big this is. So those are various, mostly Muslim pilgrims viewing this Buddhist shrine. And you see it's very, very, very small.
Wasn't it damaged in a bombing about 30 years ago?
Not that I know of, but that doesn't mean it wasn't. So I'm not sure.
But these are recent photos, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so I am out of time because I wanted to quit right about now, and I'm not through. I went faster last time. That's all right. So last time I actually got through this material. I'm not going to do that this time. But I want to show you the pretty pictures. So what I want to do is forget the detailed discussion. I'm just going to show you my slides because they're pretty, and we won't talk about them very much. But Borobudur is part of a larger complex. These are the other temples in the complex. Some of the statues that are there. And the rituals, part of the rituals involve pilgrimages from one temple to the other. These are Chinese Buddhist temples, so it's a variation. And these are lotus flowers around a central pole. And then, of course, you get the Chinese architecture causes, again, variations on the theme. But in these sorts of things, you start with cross-section sacred pole again, with the circle drawn around it in various forms. So the stupa varies, and you get these wooden, kind of Japanese variations. But again, the whole thing revolves around the sacred central pole, and you build all this rest around it. Here's just a variation. This is Angkor Wat, which is the most famous, probably, Cambodia. It's a quincunx. But the whole thing has this sacred river around it, with the quincunx in the middle. And very beautiful sort of construction. And inside you have another of these, several of these different Lingyoni structures. And again, we have this moment of syncretism. I couldn't help it. Here's the LDS Mormon Oakland, California temple. It's a quincunx. But so is the Taj Mahal. So there's another Muslim version of the same quincunx architectural design, which is the 5 pillars. And we're not even going to do the Chinese temples. It's unfortunate, but these are buildings that each kind of dynasty would build, and the other dynasties would destroy them. So we only have descriptions, and they'd build their own, and each one with a different variation. This is a design of a Mandala altar from China, and these are different designs for possible floor plans for different other dynasties' central temple shrines. This is one of the ones that survives to this day. Well, I guess this one may not survive to this day. This picture was from 1963. But if you go to the Imperial City today, right, there's the last one from the last dynasty is still there. Here's a mandala variation from a mirror. There's the waters. You'll notice the similarities to the version we saw from the Dalai Lamas. But there's also squares, T-gates, and compasses. And there's a Chinese phrase, the compass to the square, which means the world as it ought to be. This is mirrored by this version. And again, this is fascinating to me because of its connection to Freemasonry. We'll do a lecture on Freemasonry, but it's strange to me the way some of these themes weave through different traditions. Here we have in China, from I believe this is 687 AD, a funeral banner with a compass and a square. And so I told you I borrowed these slides from Michael Lyon. Michael drew this. This is a painting by Michael Lyon. He's a very, very good artist. But this is the actual banner. This is the ritual in which it was being used, but this is one of the banners. And this is two of the deities from Chinese, but it represents the birth of the universe. This is the male and female snakes wound around the pole, creating the universe, holding aloft a compass in a square, and from the square hangs a plumb bob. So they're creating the universe on these kind of funeral banner/veils. So, again, this is one of those things that just shows up all over. Mormon audiences get really excited about it. And UU audiences just scratch their head and think it's strange. Which it is. I don't know where. I still don't have a clue why these things show up everywhere they go. And then here's my last temple. I thought I'd show one from kind of the modern day. This is a Baha'i temple in Delhi, completed in 1986. And again, you'll notice the same thing. Right? Even today, they're borrowing on the same things. Although it's very ritual shy, which for me, I don't like that. But it's a place where people go and they can't preach. You're not allowed to teach or say anything. You just recite various scriptures. So the ritual is very, very clean and very kind of whitewashed in terms of the ancient ritual. But the architectural patterns from all these ancient traditions that we've shown you are still there. And it's fascinating to see them carry over clear to today. So that's it. I am out of time. Feel free to come look at the books while we take down, and thank you all for coming.
Thank you.